thank you so much for coming, attending this very special and very unique event and summit on renewable energy in Africa. This discussion today would be really about how can we enable the acceleration of affordable, sustainable, and reliable clean energy on the continent. And for that, before we do start the summit, I would just like to ask if we could just take a few seconds to acknowledge what is happening in Nigeria currently. There is a lot of distress. It's a very sad moment. And as Africans, and we're talking about Africa, if we could just take a few seconds of silence, please. Thank you. We acknowledge the lives of those that are lost, and we hope to have a better energy and dynamic in the country. So to start, I'd like to welcome our Chairman, Board of Trustees, Re-Energy Africa, Fatoumata Coker. Welcome, Fatoumata.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Again, thanks to all of our brothers and sisters from Nigeria that is participating with us and sharing this time with us. We really are appreciative, and we recognize the difficulty that is going on, and our hearts and prayers are with you. We pray that God bless Nigeria and bless the continent. So, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you might be today. We know that we have quite a distance between us all that have come into this event. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees, the partners that we have, all of our partners, the members of this organizing team, and I must say that everyone that has organized this amazing summit are volunteers from every part of the world, from Hong Kong to California. And we are grateful to have all of these brilliant brains behind the agenda and the speaking. We also, on behalf also of Lex 360, the team that is powering this eSummit, we would like to welcome you to our first Re-Energy Africa eSummit 2020. I'm very delighted and excited to share a little bit of our mission with you and also some of the things that are driving us. As we all know, it's been pushed globally that we are to move forward and leave the fossil fuel age behind us. So we on the continent understand that. However, we're only 47% electrified on the continent. And what does this say to us is that we have a lot way to go. And we have to work even more smarter to make sure that by the time 2030 comes around, as set by the UN SDG 7, we're able to accomplish that goal. And we've been really doing a great job. The team has been putting together roundtables, discussion, talking to experts, partners, talking to DFIs, speaking with individuals that are passionate about this particular SDG goal. And we're able to come up with an amazing summit. This summit brings together all of our stakeholders, from private sector to public sector to non-organizational government organizations to just pure individuals like myself that are excited about making this goal happen. Power for us is essential. When we look across all of that, what we need to do, especially when it comes to the fourth industrial revolution, we know that we need power. And how do we do it? It's by bringing all of us that's on this call today together and having a real conversation about doing it. Today, we will see some of our success stories. We will see some of the solutions that are happening on the continent. Of course, when you hear about Africa, you hear that power is so expensive. We are dealing with issues as far as generating transmitting, and distributing. But we also believe here at Reenergy Africa that we can accelerate this, that every African on the continent can have affordable, actually have access to affordable, sustainable, reliable, and clean energy. Something that Dr. Coco and I discuss all the time about this continent, and we kind of have a saying that this is a sachet economy. And what does that mean? It means that as Africans, you need to understand the way we buy, our attitude to spend. We buy as little as we want, as often as we need. So it's very, very important that if you are looking to Africa as a business opportunity, that you can fit your model in the attitude we have. We have prime example with communication, MTN, for example. We are a sachet economy. Again, buy when we want, as little as we need, and as often as we can afford. Today, I'm excited because some of the stories you will hear, it is happening. It's not a white paper, it's not a conversation, it's not a lecture. These are real opportunity for investment in projects that are happening. We have over 500 delegates that have registered for this conference. And within our delegates, we also have project developers that are doing exactly what I've described: off-grid, on-grid, wind, solar, name all of the different renewable, sustainable, we have it. And what we need today now is to bring all of this together to make sure that come 2030, we can all say that the continent is at least closer to the 100% being electrified. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for your resources. Thank you for sharing your best of breed. And we are so excited and look forward to the rest of the next 2 days in moving this mission forward. Once again, welcome to our Reenergy Africa eSummit 2020, and have a great time with us. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you, Fatoumata. I think that just could not have been better put together. And this is indeed very dynamic, and we're all very excited about this journey. So we're going to start the first conversation around investment opportunities for renewable energy technologies in Africa. And with us is the chairperson and board of CAISO and founder Renewables 100 Policy Institute, Angelina Galiteva. To you, Angelina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie. Thank you, Fatoumata. Thank you, fellow panelists, and everybody who's participating in this very important conference. I'm very excited to be here today. I'm the founder of Renewables 100 Policy Institute, which is an NGO dedicated to accelerating the transition to 100% renewable energy. And we believe that Africa is the continent that can leapfrog everybody else and become the leader in renewable energy integration and implementation. I'm also on the board of the California Independent System Operator, which is one of the largest grid operators in the world. And we have a mission of decarbonizing California's economy technically by 2045. So pushing forward of decarbonizing the world's 5th largest economy showcases that renewables actually do work, that large percentages of renewables now are cost effective, and that this is know-how and knowledge that can be transferred and accelerated much faster on the matrix approach everywhere throughout the world. I'd like to also take this opportunity to brag a little bit. I recently became the first chairperson of the board of the CAISO, and I'm the first woman to do that since the organization was founded. So power to the people and power to women in energy as well. So what we're seeing in the world on that path to 100% renewable energy, that it's a much more diverse, distributed, decentralized, digitized, and democratized system. People universally are becoming much more able to control their energy, educational, and economic destiny through renewables. Renewables such as wind, solar, and hydro are very modular and scalable. For instance, a solar cell can power something as small as a calculator, something medium-sized as an appliance, a house, a neighborhood, a region, and even a country can be powered by renewables. Renewables also are inflation-proof because nobody has figured out a way to tax the sun and wind yet. But they're also extremely diverse, from very intermittent, such as wind and solar, to 24/7 stable supply of resources such as hydropower, geothermal, and biomass. Indeed, the renewable energy revolution is evident worldwide. More than 60% of global investment went towards renewables in the last few years. Renewable resources are now the cheapest resource on and off-grid in most countries, and we see a growing percentage of them everywhere, not only because of policy and mandate, but because the costs have come down. For instance, the cost of solar has declined by over 95% in the last decade. The cost of wind has decreased by over 50% in the last 10 years. And the cost of batteries has also come down by over 87%, specifically of lithium ion. The low-cost electricity is now driving a transition to carbon-free transportation sectors as well. And transportation, especially in California, amounts to 43% of greenhouse gases. Battery-powered cars are expected to become cheaper than internal combustion engines over the next 3 to 5 years. Indeed, in California, where I live, all internal combustion cars will be banned after 2035. You will only be able to buy electric cars, according to the latest mandates. These are very exciting developments, and the continent of Africa is extremely well positioned to leapfrog into the renewable energy future and avoid many of the mistakes that we have made by investing in inefficient, expensive, and clunky fossil infrastructure, in many cases leaving us with stranded assets. The important elements for building the future that is 100% renewables are, of course, technology, policy, and financing. We know we have the technology. It's the policy and financing that needs to be fine-tuned, and especially on the continent of Africa, to ensure the successful transition and acceleration to renewables. The fastest way to power the remaining 50-some% of electricity needs for the continent is through renewables, modular, scalable, fast, and very easy to design. We know that technology is available now. So focusing on financing and policy, as I said, is extremely important, which is why the two next speakers are key. We've got two incredible experts with very, very diverse and relevant backgrounds. Mauro Soares joins us from Argentina. He was the former National Director for Renewable Energy for the country. He had a leadership role in the design and implementation of Argentina's impactful renewable energy procurement program. This program was so unique that it established Argentina as the third largest wind energy market in less than 4 years, starting from nothing. This is one of the most successful global initiatives for introducing renewable energy worldwide, and I'm very proud of what Mauro and his colleagues are doing. Currently, Mauro is the co-founder and chief operating officer of GreenMap. GreenMap is a nonprofit initiative focused on working with governments in developing countries to design and implement impactful and innovative programs, harnessing renewable resources and enabling energy market innovation. And as if Mauro didn't have much to do, being a civil servant and designing some of the most progressive renewable energy market programs, he also teaches at the two universities in Argentina. We also have participation for Bloomberg New Energy Finance, and I'll just have to say that in my role as both Renewables 100 Policy Institute and the CAISO, the data that we rely on is Bloomberg's data. It is extremely important, very accurate, and showcases the trends where we're going. And in many of my slides, all the information comes from them as well, because they are cutting edge and extremely well informed in all aspects. So Antoine Wagler-Jones leads the coverage of policy developments for the Middle East, North Africa, and Sub-Saharan Africa for Bloomberg New Energy Finance. BNEF is Bloomberg's primary research service covering clean energy, advanced transport, commodities, and more. His work tracks how policy, economics, and technological progress are shaping the energy transition with a focus on the African continent. We are very lucky to have both those speakers, so take it away, starting with Mauro and then Antoine. Thank you.
Good morning for the ones that are in my time zone, and good afternoon, good evening for the rest of the world. I'm Mauro Suarez. Thank you very much, Angelina, for your warm introduction. You mentioned some of the things we're doing. I will try to rush as soon as and finish as soon as possible on a very short presentation about what we're doing now and what we did in Argentina, which we think is very interesting for most of the people that are attending this conference and for the continent as a whole, because we are trying to put together a service for governments to help them replicate what we did in Argentina. So if you allow me, I will share the presentation, and if you have any questions, please write them on the chat, and then I'll get back to you. GreenMap. GreenMap stands for Global Renewable Energy Mass Adoption Program. It's a nonprofit organization. We identify as a fully independent nonprofit organization set up to work directly with the governments in the developing countries from a government perspective. And that's because we worked for the Argentine government as officers of the Argentine government. I myself was National Director for Renewables, and our CEO was the Undersecretary in charge of the program, reporting directly to the minister and in second line to the president of the country. And so we can speak, and we want to speak to governments from our perspective of having been in your shoes. Then we're focused on de-risking the markets. Argentina was a very risky market for renewables, and we did a good job, I guess, in de-risking it. We want to replicate that, and also in implementing programs, and with the aim of materializing projects. We're not a think tank. We're not just a policy development consultancy firm. In fact, we're a nonprofit. We're not after consultancy assignments. We're just after genuine commitments of the governments to let us help them implement and unlock renewables investments in each country, right? In the developing world, with all the complexities that it has. So we are a small team, yet we're growing very fast. Our managing team is made up with Sebastian Quinas, our CEO, myself as the COO, and Andrea Bertello is our head person for Europe and Africa. But we also take pride in a very, very powerful and outstanding board of directors who are going with us on these adventures, on this journey. And we have here, you see the pictures and names. I don't want to go one by one, but very prominent people, very known to the markets, and they're being extremely helpful. Angelina is in our board. She introduced us to this wonderful conference and the organizing team. So we're very proud of our board of advisors, which is also incorporating a few more people in the coming months. So with this, I want to talk just very shortly about how being funded. GreenMap is a nonprofit. We are fully independent. We don't take funds from the industry. We take funds from philanthropies and from other sources that are fully independent and that do not have a conflict of interest. We kicked off this program, GreenMap, with a grant from Climate Breakthrough, which is a joint effort of the David and Lucy Packard Foundation in collaboration with Oak, IKEA, and Good Energy. So how we see the problem that is that we have in the world with renewables in the developing world? Well, we see that in the developing world, renewables are not growing as fast as possible, as fast as needed to address a climate crisis. And why is that? mainly because of many risks involved in these countries that do not make it attractive enough and make renewable energy more expensive. So the way we approach that is on a credit rating basis. We see that as credit rating improves along the x-axis of this graph you see on the screen, the prices of renewables go down, right? So with all the uncertainties and the investment risks in most of the developing markets, the cost is usually above what it should be in other situations where some of these risks have been taken care of. So we are here to address that issue. By implementing our platform, we aim to lower the risks and improve the credit rating, and at the same time, of course, that will result in improvements in the economics and competition and lower prices and more affordability, which is very, very important, especially in these times of downturn in the economies of all the world. Hit by the COVID crisis, right? So in the end, what we want to do is we want to boost the markets and boost private investment, crowd in private investment, and leave the governments to do what they have to do, which is key for the economies, for their social will, and leave the investments in renewables for the private sector. They know how to do it, and they have to have the environment to do it well. So we want to create a virtuous cycle in every market where we participate. And that virtuous cycle starts, number one, with commitment from the government, political commitment, and second, with the right assessment and allocation of risks among the stakeholders. If every stakeholder in the market has clarity and ability to best take care of the risks involved, that will be the optimal result for the market and the lowest possible cost and the highest possible power installed and electricity coming to the people, right? Then has to be paired with effective tools to enhance the credit, right, for the long-term financing of this, with transparent rules for the tender processes, and that leads eventually to more and cheaper and more ubiquitous renewables in that market, both in the shorter term and in the longer term if the right program is put in place. So our approach to scaling the action that we're doing now is we're now creating our partner of selected organizations that include from the MDBs and the DFIs to some EU institutions we're talking to, some governments we're talking to already, some NGOs, like for example, last month we signed a cooperation agreement with Rocky Mountain Institute for collaboration in Africa and Latin America. We signed also a collaboration agreement with OLADE, which is the organization of all the governments of Latin America for issues around energy. We're talking to different organizations and institutions at both international and regional level to help us and to collaborate and to expand together and to help us with this and to help them with their work, because we know that this is too big a problem and it's too big a challenge for a young organization like ours, but we have our experience to bring to the table. We have three main pieces here. One is partnerships. The second one is our toolkit for guarantees, and they will get more into the details about this, but it's a 3-level package of guarantees that, depending on the countries and the political scenario and the needs in each country, have to be implemented fully or partially. And of course, this has associated costs, but it has more benefits than costs. So the right setup is what we look in each market where we'll get involved. And third, we're building our digital platform, which is a 4-module platform that starts from the de-risking assessment and the tender design, goes to the customization of the documents and the tendering itself and project execution monitoring and the full cycle kind of refeeds into our database and a global database. Sorry, we're building to learn from the experiences of many countries in terms of designing and implementing renewable portfolios at scale, right? So how we can help African countries, or how we can help any country that we plan to work with. Well, actually, the first step is to run a risk assessment for that country or market with a focus on renewables. We have our own methodology, which is blending many different sources of knowledge around how to assess and how to mitigate risks in renewable investments. Second, we can help with the design of innovative procurement programs. And just in a few minutes, I'm going to get into our lead case, our success case in Argentina with some of the key innovative elements that we want to bring and adapt to other geographies. We can review or redesign some existing programs. We're already working with a few governments that already have their programs, and we want to help them kind of do a review of that and try to improve some terms and relaunch some of those programs. We can, of course, design and customize credit enhancement and guarantee instruments to the realities and the needs of each country, and support in the implementation. Implementation is the most difficult part of all of this. You can have the best design and you can have the best program in paper, in your Excel spreadsheets, in your PDFs, but if it's not well implemented, things actually don't get rolling. So just a few more minutes I will take to show you the success story that we have to tell, which is it's called the Renovar program. There are a few sources at the end that people interested in more details can explore with the links, of course, and this presentation will be available through the organizers for you to take a deeper look if necessary. So what are the basics of our program, right? The program was done by the team that now is part of Renovar, right? The main team, the core team that implemented Renovar is now in GreenMap. It's a small team of people that we worked very hard over the last 4 years in Argentina to put it together and make it work, right? And what it does, what the program was is actually it was 4 rounds of very competitive tenders that were launched between 2016 and 2019. And all in all, we helped mobilize and award 258 projects in all technologies. That goes from wind and solar mainly, but also biogas, biomass, and small hydro projects with a combined capacity of 6.5 gigawatts, 6,500 megawatts of new build capacity. Out of that, most of that is under construction. Around 5 gigawatts are already under construction and or operation already. More than 3 gigawatts are already in operation. And we made that possible through an innovative bankable PPA with 3 levels of guarantees. We have a first level of guarantee that de-risked the payment issue that we had with the off-taker. A second level that de-risked the early termination of or many political risks that were hanging there, and it was something that worried and rejected a lot of investment from the country. We were able to take that out of the table with a put option and a guaranteed sovereign guarantee, and on top of that we built a third level of ultimate World Bank AAA investment grade guarantee with the World Bank, which had a very successful outcome, guaranteeing 41 of the awarded projects. But that you say that was only a small percentage of the program. No, actually it is. But the oversight of the World Bank and the umbrella and the quality reassurance that the World Bank brought to the program was really impressive in its effect of the whole program. So With this, the contracts, we have 2 contracts. We don't have an implementation contract, like agreement, like you have in most of countries. We only have a power purchase agreement and a trust adhesion agreement. There's a trust fund to provide all the guarantees. And those together are those 2 contracts involve the whole guarantee scheme, which has these 3 levels I just described briefly. So the framework was very attractive. A first round was carried out in September of 2016. We tendered 1 gigawatt, 1,000 megawatts in projects with a maximum size per project of 100 megawatts. And we got 6 times oversubscribed in that tender. We ran round 1.5 right after 1.2, and all in all, 1 and 1.2 ended up awarding 2.4 gigawatts. Round 2 happened a year after, in October 2017, and the oversubscription was 8 times, right? And full total awards ended up with a playoff round. After round 2, ended up in another 2 gigawatts of power. So what happened with this, right? What happened is that we ended up with this 258 projects awarded, and that includes also some that were viable because we had the Renovar as anchor, and many companies decided to expand their projects and cater to growing commercial and industrial corporate PPA market. So this 258 includes those PPAs as well, those private PPAs, not only the government-sponsored PPAs, which was something very healthy to increase activity and consolidate the renewable market in Argentina, and also some legacy projects that were like kind of retendered together with Renovar. So all in all, we had a mixture, very healthy mixture of geographies and technologies here with wind, solar, biomass, as I mentioned, all the other technologies. And this ended up, as of today, as of October 2020, 156 of those projects are either operational, 96 of those are already in operations, and 60 are under construction with CODs planned within the next 12 months. So that also mobilized the construction of 9 manufacturing plants in Argentina for wind towers, wind turbines, and solar trackers, creating 11,000 jobs, in the country, and $7.4 billion in direct private investment. No government investment here. The government provided guarantees, some out of the envelope, the country envelope with the World Bank, but most of that was private. All of that was private investment in Argentina, direct long-term finance through different innovative project finance structures and corporate deals. This 156 projects will contribute 19 terawatts. Argentina consumes around 130 terawatt hour per year, so that's around 16% of the electricity will come from renewables by the end of this part of the program. And it should continue because Argentina has a target of 20% by 2025. So we had a very smart manufacturing policy, which with a mixture of visibility in the market and fiscal benefits, we attracted Vestas and Nordex Acciona to install wind turbine manufacturing plants in Argentina very quickly. We also mobilized with the program 2 steel tower plants and 3 concrete cement wind tower plants, and 2 solar tracker plants that manufacture solar trackers for the first tier brand of trackers globally, also through specific benefits and fiscal benefits and stuff. So the international recognition of this is very varied, but the most prominent award that the program had was to be included in the RECAI, the Ernst & Young Index for renewable energy country attractiveness. We were not in the picture in 2016. We got into the index in 2017. And by May 2019, we had made it into the top 10, right? We're in 9th position for the country, which we're very proud of. Some landmark projects, some pictures to show you that this is something real that happened and can be replicated in Africa. This is a 300 megawatt solar project, the largest in Latin America at the time, built at 4,100 meters above sea level in the Puna, between in the western part of Argentina. Very, very high, very challenging environment, very high winds in the wintertime, very low oxygen to work with. This was financed by the Chinese Exim and built by Power China. And a very interesting project, is already in commercial operation. This is a 200 megawatt wind plant south of the city of Buenos Aires, also financed non-recourse by international first-line banks, built by a local developer and sponsor who was previously an oil and gas company, and that's very interesting. We have quite a few of the local companies that used to be pure oil and gas. That were mostly oil and gas, switching or diversifying into renewables at the time. This is another picture of a 200 megawatt solar PV built by French developer Neoen, also very close to the other location at 4,100 meters above sea level, also very challenging and very innovative non-recourse project finance structure made possible by the design of the Renovar program. This is another picture of an 82 megawatt Ujum, developed by a local player as well, and built in record time and also in commercial operation. This last two pictures are from YPF. It's a flagship state-owned, private and public state-owned oil and gas company that diversified into power a few years ago and built some wind farms. This is one of them, and this is the second one that just came online last month. So all in all, and this is our last slide. This is the electricity produced by the program, right? And this is real impact, right? Electricity delivered. We started with the Renovar in January 2016. By September, we had first round with the bids submitted. By June of 2018, that's a year and a half later, we had the first COD of the first 100 megawatts of wind in the province of Buenos Aires, south of the capital. Very fast construction. And by now we have 3.7 on stream, 3.7 gigawatts on stream, and we got an instant share of 22.6% just last month. So we're very proud of these results. We brought almost from nothing to over 11%, half of the target we have to 2025, just 5 years ahead of that. And we're very proud of that work. So here is the reference to the program for this success story for more reading if you want. Yes, it can be done. And that's our message. And we're open to your questions and collaborating to anybody who can reach out to us after you've heard about our existence. So thank you very much for giving me the time to present our organization and be part of this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Mauro. Thank you so much. Very exciting. And I'm sure there will be quite some questions coming forward. We would like to then call on Antoine Wagner-Jones from EMEA Energy Transition, Bloomberg NEF, and he will be talking about the investment case for energy transition in Africa. Antoine?
Yes, right here. Thank you, Angelina, for the introduction, and very interesting presentation we saw there. I think Latin America has a lot of lessons to be learned from, not just for Africa, but for around the world, about liberalizing power markets, putting in place frameworks. And what this presentation will give is an overview of sort of the the case for renewables in the continent, but also for some of the hurdles and what kind of frameworks, similar to those that we just talked about with Mauro, can be put in place to sort of overcome them. So, but very briefly first, I'll just give you an overview of Bloomberg NEF and what we do. So we're a research service. We do research. We are 250 strong in terms of our employees across 17 different offices. And we cover a number of different sectors, from renewables to decarbonising transport, agriculture, production of materials, metals, you name it. And then across that, we look at carbon markets, we look at commodities, we look at hydrogen and new technologies such as that. Before I start the presentation, I will skip a few sections just so we stay within time, because I'm conscious that we are tight on it. But if you have any questions, just write in the chat and maybe put your email so I can get back to you. But moving on. So one of the things we do is really look at the building blocks of this story in Africa, and one of them is obviously technology. And a good place to start when we talk about renewables is obviously cost and price. And one of the things that we do at BNEF is tracking and forecasting the cost of different types of renewable technologies. One of the most striking stories, part of this whole narrative, is that of PV modules. So PV modules have crashed in terms of their price, nearly 90% over the last 10 years. And we expect that to carry on as volume increases, as demand increases. So we think that CSI modules could decrease by another 37% over the next sort of 5 years. We're also seeing other trends happen in Africa with solar modules, different types of technologies being used, bifacial modules sort of making an appearance in Benban in Egypt last year. And we expect further innovation to be reflected in projects in Africa. Similar story for wind turbines. Again, we see nearly 50% decrease in prices over the last sort of 10 years. That's more gradual, but it's also interesting in that we're seeing larger turbines make an appearance. So one of the first big wind projects in East Africa was the Lake Turkana project, which had 850 kilowatt turbines. Recently, last year, Senegal saw the commissioning of the Taibanjai project, which had turbines that were maybe 4 times that, so upwards of 3 megawatts each. And that's really makes a big difference, because when you talk about OPEX expenses for wind farms, it's really that it goes down more quickly the fewer wind farms, with fewer wind turbines you have, rather than being on a megawatt basis. And it allows you to have higher capacity factors. So all of this, combined with the fact that we're seeing similarly impressive cost reductions for battery packs, for lithium-ion batteries, means that we can begin to talk about learning curves. So for each time that volume doubles, the percentage by which we see costs decrease. And that's pretty impressive when we look at the region, when we look at what we're seeing in the region being reflected by these learning curves of 28% for PV and 11% for wind, and batteries sitting somewhere in the middle. But there is something to be talked about. And again, this is very much linked to de-risking and frameworks being put in place. But risk perception is really one of the key challenges to developing projects in Africa. We all know this, but let's break it down. So if we go back to 2010, we can see the world was a very different place. And this map shows the most popular new power generation technology that was added in a given country. So we see across the world, renewables, very much a very localized story with a few European markets standing out. But when we look at Africa, we really see that additions are dominated by gas and by oil. We go forward 4 years and we see that the picture changes slightly. So we see that renewables are spreading beyond the richest countries, and we are starting to see significant additions in Africa. I think 2014 was the year where upwards of 1 gigawatt of solar was added in South Africa alone, but still the continent is still very much dominated by those fossil fuel additions. And that's in large part down to risk perceptions. So risk perceptions, we're all aware of the fact that many markets are seen as risky by developers. That's a product of a number of different factors and reasons. It's very complex, but basically boils down to the fact that many of the utilities, many of the off-takers involved in signing power purchase agreements with developers are effectively unable to cover their operating expenses, with a few exceptions. But that means that when we conducted our survey last year, 2019, we saw that pretty much all but 8 countries had significant levels of risk expected by developers. And that's important. That's very important for the competitiveness of renewables and for the business case for investing in them. And that part of the reason why that's the case is because of the fact that when we look at and we compare different technologies, renewables technologies are very sensitive to changes in cost of finance. If you perceive risk as higher, your capital cost is higher, which means that there's an outsized impact on the cost of solar, where finance makes up a disproportionate share of the levelized cost of electricity when you compare it to combined cycle gas turbines or coal. So risk really matters for renewables and really matters for their competitiveness against different types of generation technologies. And this is where renewables come in. This is where frameworks for de-risking come in, and then this is really where auctions play an important role. So over the last sort of 5 years, we saw significant innovations across the world where we started to see new mechanisms put in place for supporting renewables. One of them is auctions, which has been tremendously successful and emulated just across many different markets, as we see on this map, showing countries that have held renewables auctions. And basically involves developers bidding in. It's competitive for governments, so able to achieve low costs by attracting competition, having it carried out in a transparent way, controlling the capacity that's being awarded to developers. You end up with low prices, you end up with a less opaque process than what had preceded before, where very often a lot of the additions were made from unsolicited sort of offers on an ad hoc basis. So transparency is one thing, and it's also good for de-risking, because a lot of these mechanisms lock you in for contracts from 15 to 25 years, PPAs that allow you to sell your power at a given price. It's take or pay, so it's very favorable for developers. And there are probably 3 big auction mechanisms that are worth highlighting in Africa. There's South Africa's REIT program, which has been one of the first to be implemented, the most important in terms of the capacity volumes that have been awarded through it. And then there are others, such as KfW's Get Fit program carried out in Zambia, Uganda, and I think everyone's familiar with the Scaling Solar program carried out by the World Bank in Senegal, for very low prices last year, awarded through that. Now, it's interesting because you see different ways in which de-risking is carried out. Again, we've talked about the competitive element and why that's beneficial for governments. But for example, Scaling Solar will take all the risk of securing land and of securing a connection point off developers' hands, which again really manages to reduce the cost of finance. There's also partial risk guarantees that are put in place, like what was just described in the preceding presentation, and that really does improve the business case. And that's part of the reason why we started to see solar gain ground. So when we're looking at last year's additions now, we were looking at 2014 before, fast forwarding to 2019, and we see that there are about 10 countries in Africa where solar was the primary technology that was added to the system. So this is massive progress, and it's also progress that varies significantly in how it was sourced and the cost at which it came. So when we've collected bottom-down analysis, through developing a methodology for collecting data, talking to developers, talking to financiers, we come up with levelized cost of electricity benchmarks for different countries. And we see that on average, the cost in Africa is slightly more expensive than many other countries, and that's due to a number of factors. One of them is higher capital expenses. So CapEx is usually around $1 million per megawatt, and that compares to about $800,000 per megawatt with our international benchmark for projects that reach financial close in 2019. However, there are grounds for optimism, where we also see countries like South Africa, like Senegal, that have had a pipeline of projects going back a few years, 5 years or so, that's laying the groundwork for value chains to be created, achieving lower costs, lower risk perceptions, and some internationally competitive costs, as we see here. Now, we also look at how this translates into investment costs, which we track. We see that investment has risen pretty much consistently, with a few blips year on year as we go forwards across sub-Saharan Africa. And this is removing South Africa because of how big a share South Africa represents. And when we look at Africa as a whole, we just focus on foreign investment in renewables, we see that many of these markets are seen as attractive enough to be really alongside the heavy hitters on the world stage. So 4 African countries were among the emerging markets that received the most international investment in renewables. And these are very different in terms of why they were able to attract finance. Morocco with a very strong framework and institutions for doing so. South Africa with the involvement of local finance sort of backing a lot of the international flows that we saw, and a pretty robust auction program, well, back then. So now we can also break this finance down by region of origin. We see again that Africa, sub-Saharan Africa specifically here, is a lot more diverse than other regions. So we talked about Argentina before. When we look at Latin America, for example, a large share of foreign investment comes from Europe, whereas in Africa, we see a much more diverse picture, which is promising. However, we also see a very large share coming from multilateral institutions, international financial institutions, and that's shown here as well, where we see, when we look at that foreign asset finance for renewables, we see that a large share of it is international in countries like Egypt, with the EBRD playing a very important role in the recent Ben-Ban auction, or Kenya as well. And we see South Africa as sort of the outlier, where we're beginning to see local finance. Well, local finance plays a very important role in providing capital for renewables, but it's the exception to the rule. And we're seeing a transition towards funding coming from unilateral backers and also funding coming from local capital providers, but that's something that takes time. So again, very quickly, given that we don't have much time, I'll go through one of these new markets for renewables. And one of the ones that we look at is CNI solar. So we've talked about utility scale renewable projects, and they're starting to take off, as we've seen. However, given the fact that a lot of projects are still held back by delays, they're still held back by unbankable PPAs in a lot of situations, we're increasingly seeing developers approach commercial and industrial customers directly to secure sort of longer contracts within shorter lead times. And many different factors can be considered when we're sort of trying to analyze which markets might be most attractive for PPAs, but one of them is basically money that customers can save. So we compare the cost of solar for a 250 kilowatt project. We sort of reckon a range between $10 to $14 per kilowatt hour is reasonable. We look at that range and see in this chart how it compares to the cost of electricity from the grid to commercial customers. And we see that the cost of solar is actually cheaper than the grid cost of electricity in a number of markets such as Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Senegal, and Ghana. And what's really interesting is that we're also seeing a lot of progress and new projects being commissioned in markets where that isn't even the case. So we're seeing that in Nigeria, for example, and we identify sort of Nigeria, Kenya, and Ghana as particularly interesting markets for CNI solar in particular. And because of the fact there's a large market size that to be potentially accessed, there's also a more or less favorable regulatory framework in place. Unreliable grids increase the business case for CNI solar, as do high tariffs on those grids. And increasingly, we've seen really a ramp up in investment. When you look at 2017 to 2018 investment, we saw more of a doubling of installed capacity in 2018 compared to the preceding year, where 35 megawatts was installed across sub-Saharan Africa. We expect that to continue to ramp up and this to really be a promising route to market for a lot of renewables developers. Now I'll skip through the next two, but another area where we see a lot of growth is mini grids. We recently published a report that's available, freely available online, that you can access with SE for All, where we did a market outlook and did a few case studies in sub-Saharan Africa and Africa specifically. And we see this as a high growth area for hybrid mini grids, which means mini grids that are paired with solar assets. And we've also produced a large body of research on hydrogen and the production of green hydrogen specifically. Now, Europe being one of the large demand centers that we see emerging in coming years. Over the last year, we've seen many strategies and goals and roadmaps being released by the EU, by different member states. We also see corresponding increase in demand that could potentially be tapped by renewables located in North Africa. Morocco notably signed a cooperation agreement with the German government back in June. And we expect that shipped by pipeline green hydrogen could be potentially a way of monetizing the surplus in green energy that we might see, or clean energy that we might see developing in certain markets in North Africa. So I'll leave you on that. There are a few other areas that I think are promising, but overall, it's been a slow transition towards installing large volumes of renewables in sub-Saharan Africa. But we're getting there, and a number of different factors are coming together that lead us to believe that there's a lot of potential. Investment will continue to ramp up, and the future is bright.